It's season 2 of Rabbit Holes with Aaron. We're going to be trying some new things. We've got enhanced Rabbit Holes with Aaron episodes on Patreon. And also, we're putting our podcast on skool.com, which is spelled Skool. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. Welcome to Rabbit Holes with Aaron. I'm Aaron, and with me today I have as my guest Laura Klinke. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, you got it right on the money.
Okay. From the library. She is the head librarian of the Sanger Library, and I started doing pottery there, and they liked it so much they kept asking me to come back, and so that's how I know her. But welcome, Laura.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to a great discussion.
Yay, that's what it's all about. So we talked about a question, and I'm going to ask a different question that I normally ask. My wife loaded me up with this one for my listeners. How does the library decide which books to keep stocked?
So we're actually going through that process right now. We're a small library, and we're finding that some of the areas that see a lot of usage and a lot of circulation need more room to grow. And then other areas of the library's collections, we're not seeing a whole lot of turnover. So we're kind of reimagining the space and looking around to making the most out of the space that we do have. And so oftentimes we run circulation reports that will give us a better idea of how often an item circulates. So right now, if we ran a report today, I could probably tell you that like Frida McFadden, one of her books is probably in our top 10 list for adult fiction. And then Dogman is one of the more popular titles for junior fiction, junior graphic novels. And so a
Okay.
lot of times we take a look and we see what does circulate, what kind of condition it's in. If it hasn't circulated in a really long time, then we might consider to take it out of the collection and replace it with something that would. A lot of times it's different areas of the collection need to be replaced more often because that information changes so rapidly. So health is a really good one that we need to go through and make sure that we're taking out some of the older health books and replenishing them with more current information. And so we go and we run reports. We also look at things based on condition and whether it's circulated or not. Sometimes some libraries work really well with just doing a finger test. Like they'll go over by the stacks and they'll go look and see how dusty things are.
The finger test. I like it.
The finger test. But yeah, a lot of libraries will go through a lot of those statistics and deem what is circulating, what's not. There also might be holes in the collection that we might need to fill. So, and there's lots of tools and things like that that help us kind of crunch the data and find those holes and help fill some of those holes. So it can take and be a long process, and it can be kind of amusing though, because sometimes you'll be like, wow, I thought we got rid of this, or you find a really old book. There used to be a really great website that we used to go to. A lot of librarians and stuff would laugh about. It's called Awful Library Books, and they would find some of the old things in their collections and submit them. So you'd have some like titles from the 70s and things like that were really kind of fun, and they'd jokingly make jokes about different covers and different funny titles and things like that. And unfortunately, that website's no longer around anymore. There were two librarians that were running that library blog, and kind of wanted to kind of continue doing something else. But it was a fun one, and you could find a lot of really funny things in there. And because there's always some dusty something that you're like, oh, shocked to see that you still had in your collection.
Yeah. Yeah, me and Jill were traveling around. We'd pull up and we'd see a stack of books that the library was getting rid of, either for free or for really low price. And I was looking at one book, and I think it was, gosh, I can't remember the name of it. Well, anyway, it was an older book, but I looked, and it still had a card system in the back with stamps, And it was like the last time it had been checked out was 1982. When I was in second grade, and I was like, okay, I can see why you got rid of that one. It's been a while. But yeah.
So we what we end up doing with our discards a lot of the times is Sanger has the purple bus, the ISD system, school system has a purple bus where they do a lot of on bus tutoring and outreach to all the kids throughout Sanger ISD and teens too. So a lot of times we'll donate a lot of our books to the purple bus. And then sometimes we'll put some of them out in our foyer for an ongoing like book sale for the friends that help support our Friends of the Library group. So we try to make the most of those discards. Sometimes some ones that are really, really tattered, we end up turning into buttons or we use them for crafts. So, you know, we try to be mindful of what we have and make the best use of it when we can.
Yeah, nothing wasted.
Yes, nothing wasted.
Yeah. Do you have any questions for me?
Actually, I've been kind of going on this thought because I'm going on vacation next week and wasn't sure where I was going to go and ended up finding a cheap flight to Miami. So I'm going to go to Miami and drive down to the Keys to see Judy Bloom's bookstore called Books and Books. So it kind of made me think about her. She was such a huge part of my growing up. I think a lot of women my age could probably say that. And and so I'm just kind of curious what authors that might have impacted you growing up.
Yeah. Yeah, and I thank you for giving me a little time. You asked me that question. You prepared me in advance, and I was thinking about it and trying to organize them. But I would say, yeah, definitely as a teenager, like, I had a library card, and I went to the library, and I read probably two different authors more than anybody else, Stephen King and Anne Rice. Actually, I became a library aide in 11th grade, and I just sat there and went down the row vampire books, of the row of fiction vampire books. Most of them were Anne Rice, but there was other ones there too. And I just, I ate books like people eat food. It seemed like as a teenager, and that was my only escape. But then, and you might think, well, Stephen King, well, you're such a nice guy, or at least a good kind of guy. Like I do pottery with kids and stuff. It's like, how did Stephen King inspire that? But I guess the end of my question would be, I guess I've reconciled all that because for the last 10 years, the 100 books I've read, all of them have kind of been self-help,
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I needed some reconciliation after reading Stephen King. It was kind of dark literature, but yeah, there's the answer.
Yeah, Judy Bloom was a huge part of my life. One of her books, Just as Long as We're Together, featured. I'm adopted, and I come from a family with three older brothers. And so it was the first time I had read a book that had a character that was Asian and adopted. And so, like, I was in fourth grade when I read it, and it blew my mind. I was like, wow, I'm reading something that I can relate to. For me, that was a
Wow.
huge part because I didn't see a whole lot of that reflected in what I read a lot of the time when I was a kid. So for me to have something that I could relate to and she talks a lot about it, a little bit of it in her book and everything. But it was nice. It was nice to have something and to see part of myself kind of reflected in her characters. And I've always really enjoyed the way that she tells in a lot of her stories, just growing up, the facts of life and the trials and tribulations of growing up and becoming a kid into an adult and all of the stories and things that you encounter. They're just so incredibly relatable is what I've
Yeah.
always admired about her.
Well, thank you for telling us more about Judy Bloom. I saw her books at that age, but of course I was a guy, a boy, and I was interested in sci-fi and action and gladiators and you know and cars that drive by themselves, but because of ghosts or whatever. And so it was like it was a wholly different. I was in a different genre, but yeah, I've seen a lot of her books, and I haven't read any, but they were really popular back then. They were everywhere. I remember in the library. Wow, I am really a rabbit hole that I found in what you had to say was what's it like having well, first of all, what age if you don't feel uncomfortable, what age were you adopted?
I was 4 months old when I was adopted.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
So you really got to see your three older brothers in action as you grew up.
Yeah, actually, the youngest of the three of my brothers, he was actually the reason why I got adopted. He was at school, and my mom had been talking about, maybe adopting a child and everything. And his first grade teacher was also thinking about adopting children too. So he started talking to his teacher, and then his teacher started talking to my mom. And so a bunch of us actually all came over from Korea at the same time. So it was really great. I got an opportunity to grow up with other kids, and we were all very close in a lot of ways, and we had like a, not really like a support group, but we had a group of other kids that were adopted too that we would kind of hang out with a lot of the times. So we had an opportunity to have that, which was great. And then us, all four of us, we were all around the same age. Some of
Okay.
them went to a different they went to a private school. I went to a different school, but when we got to middle school, we were in middle school together, but we also were in Girl Scouts together too. And my mom was the troop leader. So it was a really nice to have that growing up, because I grew up in upstate New York is where I grew up. And so it was really nice to have that camaraderie, and to have a lot of the same shared experiences growing up, and to be able to kind of talk to one another about that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I had very different childhood. I was the oldest son, and I didn't know I was the oldest grandson, oldest son, oldest of everything, the first guy to show up as a baby. And, I got along with my brothers okay, but I don't know what their world looked like. Now I know more because we talk. But back then I was thinking about me. I was thinking about blazing a trail. I was thinking about, good things, you know, not necessarily about them. And to contrast with what you shared, you had a group of kids that you kind of grew up with, and you had that camaraderie. We were really nomadic. So it was me and my two brothers against the world. My middle brother was 2 years younger than me, and of course, my youngest brother was 3.5 years younger than me, which doesn't sound like much. It's not a lot now, as you know, but like developmentally, there's a big difference between 1 and 4. There's a big
Hmm.
difference between 4 and 7. And so I moved through their world with grace and confidence, and I never looked back, and I never really thought about them. Now we're good friends. And I try and make it up to them that I didn't think about them then as much. But I wasn't really mean to them or anything. They may say a different story. I don't know, but that's my story. So yeah, it's interesting how we grow up in different dynamics with different people around us. You know, I mean, and I've read, and you probably heard of it or read it as well, the birth order book and birth order theories about what order
Hmm.
you are and what traits you'll have based on an order. And so you would be the youngest child. I would think, and I'm just curious, if your older brothers were like always looking out for you, and were they in that way the same as what I think other older brothers are like?
Yeah, they were very protective of me. I mean, through high school, my second oldest brother, who he came home from college and he said, "You're not wearing that." And I had just a dress on and it wasn't anything outrageous or anything like that. And so he went into my closet and picked out like a turtleneck with like really long sleeves and this dress that I had bought, that because I'm so short, I'm only 5 foot. This dress went down to my ankles. And so he was like, "You're wearing this really crazy turtleneck with really long sleeves with a dress that goes all the way down to your ankles." And so he was just really overprotective of me. But they also like to joke around and do a lot of like crazy things. It wasn't until I was in my 20s that I understood how to play Monopoly correctly, because when we were kids, they would make up all sorts of rules and everything. And so and I was like 6. I don't know how it was a huge flex to say that you're cheated at Monopoly with your 6-year-old sister, but
Yeah,
they apparently wanted that flex, and so they would be like, "Oh, well, this is the time. This is part of the game when you give everybody everything to the person on your left." And so, they would joke around and do those kinds of things, and we've always had a really good time, but there's always been some hijinks with them for sure.
yeah, we We boys are a mischievous lot for sure, and that was I could never get that over on my brothers. They were never young enough, but I did win at Monopoly more. But yeah, maybe there's something to that.
I don't know. I appreciate playing Monopoly. I haven't played it in a while, but my husband and I would play it quite often. But he was the one that showed me how to play it because I was like, I don't really, never really paid attention to the rules. And whenever anyone else wanted to play, or it came up, people were like, oh, I'm just Monopoly. But I just never really paid much attention to it because I didn't understand how to really play it. So we had like a small resurgence, my husband and I, in playing it, and we would have some fun with it and everything. We haven't played in a while, but yeah, it's fun to pass the time.
Yeah, I we had a week we were spending on our way back on our trip in Tennessee, and we met my bonus daughter and her husband, and they ended up talking some smack and said, well, let's play Monopoly with the old people. And I don't know how many hours. They didn't track stuff like that back in the 80s and 90s, but I'm sure I've got about 10,000 hours of Monopoly playtime. So when they said, we'll play with the old folks and give them a chance or whatever, me and Jill were playing, and, well, I won. None of my big brother whatever things worked. It was all adults, and I was a stickler for the rules. But man, we played it for an hour and a half, and sure enough, I ended up being the victor. And I was like, it's not because I got a lot of skill; it's because you called me an old person. Sorry, it's out of my
Well, you've got
hands.
more experience. You know where your likelihood of where you're gonna land.
Yeah, it's at this level where they roll the dice, and I'm like, you're on over here on this base, and they're like, they're still counting on their fingers, like 6, and then they count 1, 2, 3, 4 with the pieces. 6, and I'm like, you rolled double sixes, you're over here. They're like, then they have to count it out anyway. But I already know because I just know it's set up on a 10 system. That's what level we're playing with here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Board games were a big part of my childhood. Sounds like you and your husband play board games.
Yeah, we do. We do. I have a closet full of board games, and I don't always get around to playing all of them, but yeah, we definitely have our favorites.
Well, what's your favorite board game? Maybe I know it.
We've been playing a lot of Uno lately. We went out of
Hmm.
town recently, and we always end up getting decks at Uno, and they have so many different decks at Uno now,
Yeah.
where you can do all sorts of crazy things. But yeah, we always keep coming back to Uno a lot of the time.
Yeah, I like Uno. There's a lot of emotions that can be released in Uno. When you get
Yes.
to skip 10 times in a row or whatever, it's like, maybe I need a snack or something.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, what are you reading now?
Actually, I'm reading a book called Me But Better. It's the science of personality. So I watched a segment on CBS Morning with Jane
Hmm.
Pauley. I tend to watch it a lot on Sundays, and she had a segment on there about this woman who wanted to try to change her personality. She tended to be really neurotic and
Hmm.
found herself in a situation where she wasn't really well liked at work, and was a lot of her people and her peers thought she was really unapproachable. So she went on this whole year-long journey to try to change her personality to where she felt that she's a little less neurotic and maybe a little bit more open to some of the personality traits that she thought were kind of difficult for her. So she was a little bit neurotic about things and then would overanalyze, and just the anxiety, and then she just didn't want to, she's very introverted, and so she's trying to get herself out of this, how she kind of approached things, and was working towards changing her personality. And so she went on this year-long journey trying different things to help change her personality. She joined a improv group, and at first it was just kind of to get her out of her comfort zone. And there were other people there that were like, "I'm a lawyer, and I need to be able to speak better, and I need to be able
Hmm.
to feel more confident." And there were other people in there, and then so she went through the first set of the improv, and kind of graduated to different levels and everything to kind of break her out of her shell. And she did a lot of research about personalities and talked to a gentleman, a professor over at SMU.
Hmm.
And he's got a personality test and talks about all the different parts of your personality and some of the areas that you can probably more readily change and the others that might be a little bit harder to change. But yeah, it's been an
Hmm.
interesting book. I haven't quite finished it yet, but yeah, it's been
Wow.
a good read so far. Yeah.
It sounds interesting. Changing your personality. I mean, I took a class, or I've been watching a class on Jordan Peterson University. Me and Jill were watching it on our identity, on a person's identity, and what goes into changing that. And he talks about it from all different spheres, from Freudian belief to, all different theoreticists, and it's really deep stuff, but yeah, it's more, I don't know, I can't wrap my hands around it, but it's more about choosing who you want to be and then moving that direction, setting goals to be that person. But I can talk about identity from a fun perspective. Like, I have this theory, and I don't have a book on it yet. I mean, I don't plan on writing any books on it, but it's like we don't even know who we are until we experience it. A simple example is, I don't know if I like windsurfing or not. I've never done it. Maybe I would get on that surfboard with that kite thing and it would just be perfect and easy. Or maybe it'd be challenging, but I'd really enjoy it. I don't know that yet. I don't know about deep sea diving. But every little thing we try teaches us something more about ourselves and kind of unlocks a little bit of who we are, a little bit more. As we find our favorites, it's like, that's my favorite ice cream. I didn't know I had a favorite ice cream, but that's my favorite. Now I know. So we're kind of in this process of unlocking it. What do you think about that?
Oh yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I think it's important to try new things and to get out of your comfort zone every once in a while. I think a lot of personal growth comes from that. You can't just sit and pretend that you know, life isn't outside the door. There's not other things to experience out there and again, you might find that you like it, you might find that you don't, but you won't find out unless you get out of your comfort zone and try something. But
Yeah,
yeah, I think there's a
comfort.
lot of a lot of to what your thinking is about all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been experiencing it a little bit because we've been seeing all the different states, and now we're gonna, I probably told you, we're gonna go to Thailand in June, and so we're gonna experience different cultures and different people and different kinds of fruit and different animals, and we'll learn more about ourselves. So yeah, Jill was really worried about going to Thailand, and she wouldn't mind me sharing this with everyone, including herself. She doesn't like crunchy vegetables very much, and she doesn't like anything, but she doesn't like seafood. So she was worried that they were going to be eating seafood there all day long. But now she's done research, and we can go to Thailand because she's sure there's plenty of things that she's comfortable eating over there. So that was good. But she's trying new things all the time with that. I can brag on her. Like, she's not comfortable, but she's like, well, I'm going to at least try this. Let's just throw green pepper in there. The big green pepper you get at the grocery store. I'm going to try this and see if I still don't like it. So she's kind of going through this comfort zone thing as well. I guess when you mentioned comfort zone, I started wondering, in what ways may I be pushing myself out of my comfort zone? And one comes to mind, the hardest thing I'm doing right now, and that's sitting down and making myself write a novel. I don't know how to do it. I've never done it before. I've written some books of poetry, but I've not written a novel with a story and main characters and plots and all this stuff. I thought it would be a lot harder than it is, but the challenging part is finding a time and making myself sit there, setting a timer. Right now I'm setting a timer for 30 minutes. But I'll tell you, the miracle is it goes by like that. 30 minutes, my fingers on the keys, typing stuff out. The story unfolds before me, and I think it's the same for everybody. I don't think I got any magic powers. Talking to other authors, you just got to set the time up and be intentional about it and remove distractions. Maybe that sounded like the recipe for building discipline in any area. But what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you, and I've heard a lot of authors talk about how just having consistency and being really intentional with your time and making time and just writing and not getting so caught up in editing while you're writing
Mm,
and just going with that whole process and then making time for edits to come back and look at things because in fact that was one of the things I think Judy Bloom talked a lot about with her writing process. She would write on I believe a typewriter, and she would just go through. I don't know if that's really still her process, but at one point it was, and she just kind of just write through. Yeah, among what I've heard about a lot of the whole writing process and all of that is just to find that time and carve it out and be intentional and just continue to write. Like
yeah,
anything, like you were saying, it just takes consistency there. If you always show up every day, you're making some progress, which is
yeah,
better than none. And if you get too caught up in your head and worrying if that sounds good or that doesn't sound good or I don't know. I think sometimes we all kind of sometimes get in our head a little bit and think maybe a little too hard.
no, definitely, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I think. Well, I better research everything first. It's crazy when you say it out loud. It's impossible. It's not humanly possible to do the amount of research I think I need to do. Or what was the other thing? Research. Yeah, setting aside going to the places where my character's going to go and looking at that place and visiting some places there and looking at archaeological digs if it's applicable. It's like I need to do all that first, or I need to learn about writing first, and then and I guess some level of rudimentary writing is helpful. But at the same time, it's like I don't have to have a master's degree in literature to start writing. So yeah, start where you
Yeah,
at, I guess.
I listened to and I was reading on audio, and then I was also reading it too. But Amy Tan has a great book about her. She's got a couple of memoirs and biographies, but she talks a lot the most recent one that she did about her whole writing process. And she said, "I wish that I understood music." She's like, "There's times where like I feel like I could get everything out that I feel like musically, but I don't play an instrument, I don't do all of that." But she oftentimes will find different kinds of music that she listens to when she knows that she needs to work on particular areas of her writing, if in different kinds of tones and all of that. It was really interesting to read about her process, her writing process,
Yeah,
and everything that goes into it. I really admire what authors do and all of the research that goes into their stories and just how creative that whole process can be. I admire that because that's not something I've ever been really good at. But again, like you're saying, you need to constantly kind of practice and hone your craft. But I've never been really gravitated towards anything like that. I've always just enjoyed, but not necessarily writing. I think that for me, that's a skill that would have to take a lot of time to hone.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I got held up too. I was trying to think a minute ago about what things hold me up, and research was one, and the other one was I need to make sure I need to have other people read what I've got so far to make sure it's okay. And I'm like, I sent it out to 5 different people, got their approval first. I had 2 or 3 chapters together, and I sent it to them, and like nobody read it, and I was just waiting on nothing. And then one guy read it, and he did edits, but nobody. Well, I guess it's true, and you shouldn't expect anybody else to care about it as much as you do in the process. And so I was hoping other people would like it, and so that would help me to keep working on it. And that never came out either. I had to just, like we talked about, set the time aside, sit down, make it almost painful, and make it happen. So. Well, are there any other rabbit holes you want to go down that we've talked about? I have a few written down if you don't.
I don't have any that come to mind right off the bat. Do you? I'd be curious to.
Yeah, well, you mentioned editing,
Mhm.
and well, and this is maybe I had another podcast recording just a few days ago, and she said she used to do editing for somebody on some of the documents that they produced, but then they got ChatGPT to do it, and she doesn't do it for them anymore. And I was just wondering, like, how big is ChatGPT maybe in your world? It's wiped out human editing to some extent. What do you think about it?
It can be a useful tool to kind of bounce ideas. I've used it before for when I've had to like we've had to create a brochure for
Hmm.
say like our friends group or something like that and help out with that. And so you only have so much space, maybe like 20 or 30 words, and trying to I sometimes will help use it in that sense of editing for length. So
Okay.
like, oh well, I really need some help kind of, drilling down and editing this to maybe 25 words or 50 words here to be able to fit on a pamphlet or something like that. So and so I found that that's been helpful before, and I think there's other times I think it's good sometimes bounce some ideas off of, but to use that as a way to write like long novels and things like that, I think is kind of crazy. There's I forgot which publisher it is that they recently just revoked one of their authors' books because it was suspected that AI was being used to write
Hmm.
the whole entire thing. I think it was Hachette, I think was the publisher. But I think there's been tools out even before, like this big AI boom. J.K. Rowling was starting to write under a pen name, and they were trying to figure out like who it is and everything and so they went in and I don't know if they had I guess those AI tools I guess way back when this is several years ago they were able to pick up that was that her pen name and figured it all out based on the writing. They were like, oh well she tends to use these phrases, tends to lead in with this XYZ JKLMNLP, and they were able to identify it. So yeah, I don't know what that means for publishing and everything coming through for the future, but yeah, way back then they were looking and trying to figure out what pen
Hmm.
name she was using, and they had tools to figure that out. So I don't know, it's just all of the AI boom and where that's gonna kind of land us. I don't know. It's an interesting time.
Isn't it? For sure. Yeah, I've used ChatGPT for a myriad of things. I mean, not necessarily. Some of them with writing my book, like research, and like I asked ChatGPT to evaluate what grade level I was writing at, and I asked ChatGPT, how do I write a bestseller? And it told me like write at the eighth grade level, and then I loaded like, let's just say chapter one in, and said what grade level, and it was like, oh, this is 12th grade. So for you, 12 plus grade, I'm literary, whatever, I'm poetic. I didn't know, I've never tested myself in any way to see what grade level I comprehend or write at. And so that was very enlightening for me to realize if I wanted to write a book that I thought it was going to be the better words you use, the more intricate you are, the better your book's going to do. But come to find out, the more readable it is for a wider audience, families, kids, teenagers, adults, that's what makes it a bestseller, the mass appeal. I didn't realize that. But that's
Mhm.
just one thing ChatGPT has showed me. There's times I'll take a journal, because I write my journal most days. I'll take a journal entry. I'll say, ChatGPT, evaluate this for me. And it'll say, you got a little bit of grandiosity in your speech, where you assume you're right and whatever. So it was an interesting, kind of eye-opening. Maybe we need to take our personality questions to ChatGPT. I don't know, but it gathers a lot of knowledge. I haven't been unhappy with it. You
Mhm.
know, then again, now that I've worked with it a little bit, I'll see like a post or an email from somebody I don't know, and I'm like, ChatGPT, I recognize your work here. So it's like AI generated marketing stuff, and I'm like, oh, I recognize you, my old friend. But yeah, it is an interesting time for that. Yeah, well, I'm interested in Amy Chan's memoirs too. That sounds interesting. I think I could benefit from that as writing. There's a word, you said the word neurotic, and I'm not, I mean, I know it kind of feels negative to hear it, but what does that actually, in even nice terms, what does that mean? Do you know what that means, or can you put it in easier language for
Yeah,
my brain to
she was
understand?
just in that book, she just talks a lot about her anxiety levels and that and a lot of the personality traits, some of them are very much what you've inherited. And she was talking about how her father had a really bad case. He just was always neurotic and just worrisome all the time, to the point she talks about in the book about how they were getting ready to get a new car, and he was so worried about getting the car from Japan because it was in Hiroshima, and he was afraid that a particle from all of the nuclear particles were going to be in the car, and that it might be like in the glove box or in the air, somewhere in the car. And then when the car came to Texas, that he was really worried about getting cancer. And she said that was like the level of anxiety and worry and
Hmm.
just complete and utter ability to just stop and stop worrying about things. And she said that she inherited a lot of those tendencies where her anxiety would just get out of control, or she wouldn't be able to worry about things. And then sometimes she actually thought of her anxiety as a superpower, because she felt like worrying about whether, like, say, a deadline, a work deadline or something like that, if she didn't get it done, or if her work wasn't good enough, and it would mean career suicide. And that, so a lot of those fears would power her to work through an entire weekend without any
Hmm.
sleep, without anything really. She just would power through all of that. And so she talks a lot about her worry and her anxiety and everything that culminates. And she says it's a huge part of her personality.
Hmm.
And she was afraid that when she would go into this whole experiment in changing her personality, she was afraid to actually lose like too much of that, because she felt that had a lot to do with her work ethic. Even though, a lot of people think that anxiety and all of that is a negative, she most certainly thought of it as a positive.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it seems like inward focused and a little bit anxious. Well, a lot of bit anxious and worried about possible scenarios that might play out. Okay. Yeah, I guess I don't know. I didn't know what neurotic meant, but that does, like, it's kind of almost like self absorbed in your own world, I would think to some extent, like in your own mind, things are going around. Okay. Well, and I'm not trying to talk bad about her. I just was
Oh no,
curious
it
because
was
I've
it.
heard that
Like I
word.
said, yeah, it was an interesting describing her personality in that sense, because I've met some people that have had their own challenges with anxiety and everything, but not to that level of extent that she portrays and talks about in her book. And so, and it was just interesting getting her kind of perspective on that, because oftentimes I think people talk about a lot about it in that sense. Today, in these days, and self-care and all those kinds of things, and to putting it into perspective of what some people might be dealing with, and that there's different shades of all of that. And so, and hearing that was kind of interesting for me, because I think I don't want to make it seem like it's just a word that gets thrown around, but it just, and in some ways I think sometimes it does get thrown around a little bit. But I think bringing some real world kind of experience with someone's real life experience with that, I think is helpful.
Yeah.
I don't know, at least it was for me in understanding things.
Well, it makes me understand how it could fit into her book because recently I've heard that, like, if you want to grow the most, you go to the darkest place in yourself. And so she's like taking a hard look at her personality, where she probably causes her a lot of struggles, maybe in relationships and at work and in her personal life. And so she goes there, she dives in, she learns everything she can about it, and then she shares it with the world. That's what books are for.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely.
And I love, and this is me for a second, about fiction books. Because at first I thought, after reading all those self help books I told you about, I thought, I need to write a self-help book. I need to write a book. I need to write. Like, grown-ups write. I don't know where I got that, but maybe college probably. They're like, all of you need to be writers, or whatever. And I've heard it from other people too, but that's a mature way to express oneself is by writing. I keep hearing these thoughts, but I realized, I don't know how I realized. So I was kind of on a fiction. I didn't read any fiction. How does this help me? Right? I have self-help books that, for instance, change my personality or help me negotiate hard situations or, on and on the list goes. Help me be confident, help me make goals for myself and change. But now I'm realizing fiction is a whole different ball game where you can create a world where your concepts and theories work. And if you can do that, in a fiction book, then it makes it a little bit more grabbable, I think, to other people. And it kind of floats under the radar. I'm not writing a book about how to straighten your life out. I'm writing a book about a person that has different problems and runs into somebody who's causing problems or whatever eventually. But I'm realizing that fiction is a really good vehicle. We see it in sci-fi all the time, like Back to the Future. We still want cars that fly and skateboards that float, just like Back to the Future movie. And I think they've invented at least skateboards that float. They didn't work as good, but anyway, it kind of sets a pace for humanity to set some goals. Go into space. What do you think about fiction in that way?
Yeah, no, I think fiction can be a great tool. I mean, like I said before, growing up as a kid, I didn't really have a whole lot to relate
Hmm.
to. And so for me, seeing myself kind of reflected in the pages of someone's book, like with Judy Bloom's and then Amy Tan's The Joy Luck Club, that was another one that really, and that's one of my favorite books actually, and I go in
Hmm.
and read it quite regularly. And it just be able to have something to relate to, because like I said, where I grew up was in upstate New York, and I was the only Asian kid in my class, and
Hmm.
until for a couple of years, and then another young Asian girl was in first grade, I think, when I was in fifth grade. So there wasn't a whole lot for me to relate to on that sense.
Hmm.
My parents did a good job about introducing me to my culture, and later on when I was in high school, I helped out as a counselor in a Korean culture camp for kids, and so I still really appreciate being able to see my experiences reflected in a book, and that's something that publishing over the last few years has really done an amazing job of having books that really do reflect the people of today. And I think it's so important for children and adults and everybody out there to have a book that they see themselves in, that they have something to relate to uh, growing up or going through an experience. I think fiction does a wonderful job at 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 really highlighting some of those areas that people go through every day, the struggles and the celebratory times of your life and everything else in between. I think it can be a really great tool and be very comforting, and also can be really helpful in identifying and giving you some understanding of maybe what you are going through, and again, just seeing a lot of your own experiences reflected in that, and then if also learning about other people and other situations too. I think it broadens people's ideas of the world outside their own world. Not everybody can jump on a plane and experience things outside, so I think that's what fiction and books do for everybody, and that's I think it's so important that there are materials out there and everybody has access to those materials. It's so important to be able to have a choice and be able to have an opportunity to seek knowledge and educate yourself in everything that you do. It's a powerful thing.
Absolutely. I love it. And I am in 100% agreement with you. I had nobody really of my age in my life. I had younger brothers, but the library was my place. I had a library card and a bicycle. And I would just get a few more books, read them, and take them back and get a few more at my leisure. It was my first source of freedom. I checked out a book on calligraphy, and I ended up writing my own high school graduation invitations in calligraphy, from what
Wow.
I learned in the book. And I was, I always preach to my kids about it. You can learn anything from a book. Of course, now there's YouTube videos, which if you're working on your car, a book might not help you as much as a YouTube video. Like, oh yeah, that looks like my tire. Okay, oh look, that looks like the same way I can take mine off, and I can work on my brakes or whatever the case may be when I had no knowledge in advance. But I'm not trying to segue to that because I think I'm with you 100%. Like librarians were my favorite people, and they knew me by name. So to this day, and that's what caused me to invite you to be on my podcast. I was like, you know what? I need to get a librarian on you. I want to get, and I had a few others too, like a school teacher, but I haven't got that one yet. But hey, librarian. And is that why you're a librarian? Was your love for books? You were like, man, I could be around books all day long. What was it?
I fell into this in a very kind of unconventional kind of way. Well, I mean, they're not necessarily unconventional, but I wasn't intending to be a public librarian. My degrees are in health promotion and health studies, and I went to TWU to get a dual degree program in library science and health studies because at the time, I love learning about things about health. I love encouraging people and all of that, but I just didn't feel like I had the necessary tools to do research at the time. And I was like, oh, library science would be a good idea, learn better ways to research things and all of that and those whole aspect of research and then the health stuff, they would kind of have this symbiotic relationship and it just sounded like a really good idea. And so I was intending on being a medical librarian, but it's very difficult to get your foot in the door. And so I
Mm,
did my practicum over at Crum Library and I really enjoyed it. And I'm not surprised because there's a lot of service. It's very service oriented in the sense of serving the public. And I grew up as a Girl Scout, like I was telling you, and I got my Gold Award. And service has always been instilled in me from the time I was little. And
mm,
it is a humongous part of who I am. I enjoy helping everybody in any way that I can. So that aspect of librarianship suits me really well. It was as a kid, I was not the biggest reader. I did enjoyed reading. I loved reading Judy Bloom. I would go to the school library and pick out books and everything. But if you had asked me as a kid, or if you had asked me in high school if you're and told me that I was going to be a librarian, I would be like, well, I don't know about that, and I wouldn't have ever thought that I would have gone down this career path. But I love it. Like I said, I enjoy helping people, and I think it's so important to be able to have a place where everybody is welcomed to come to the library. There's no expectation to spend money. It is one of the very few places that is free and open to
yeah.
everybody. And I think it's just so important to be able to be a resource there for everybody, to have all sorts of different viewpoints from A to Z, and everything in between. I think it's so important to have that there and it to be a place there everyone's welcome to come, and I, like I said, I enjoy what I do. I enjoy connecting with people. I enjoy helping them, and that's a huge, huge reason why I love what I do. Um, I think it's so important for, especially for our community, for them to be able to have those resources and to have some fun, and the library is the place to be for fun
Yeah.
and learning.
And I don't think I've told anybody this, but when me and Joe were on the road and visiting all the states and everything, in everywhere we went, we'd be like, what's the small town library here like? And we would go there and just sit down. Jill would go get 5 or 6 books, and I would maybe be writing on my novel or maybe pick up a couple books. I have this weird habit of I'll go into a library, I'll look at the shelves. Usually it's a nonfiction book. I'll take it off, I'll read it for 30 minutes somewhere in the middle. And I've learned so much that way. It's so crazy. The way books are lined up and set up so that They're telling you what's in the book in the first part. If you go to the middle, you start getting into the good stuff. And then the really good stuff is at the end, right? I mean, that's nonfiction books anyway. So, yeah, we just have these habits that revolve around the library. The library is, I love that it's such a quiet place. You know, some libraries are different than others, and kids always make things interesting. But there's always usually a little nook with a chair somewhere in the library where if you need time by yourself, you can just sneak over there into the corner and nobody even knows you're there, and you can read as long as you want until the library closes. And it's been, I guess I would even say it's been kind of a refuge for us in our trips. This place where nobody's asking me no questions in another dialect of English. Nobody's, expecting me to be doing anything, or I'm not in the wrong place if I'm in the library. So yeah, it's been a place we really gravitate towards in our journeys. I'm sure when we go to Thailand, we'll be looking for a library. Same as here.
Yeah, I want to see pictures. That's one of the nerdy things that I do when I go on vacation. I go visit libraries all the time, and then I have like a bad habit. I'll go in and I'll start straightening things up.
You're like, oh, these books are out of order. I'll fix it.
Oh, fix that, or I'll push a chair in, and yeah.
Well, and I love how it's a place of service too, and that's the thing you can count on. Well, I do have to spend money at the library sometimes if I want to, have full range because I'm so nomadic. I never live anywhere. So, you guys were gracious enough to give me a temporary library pass because I'm nomadic, but because I do pottery for the library as well, Jill has been using that up. I mean, I think she gets to check out 2 books at a time. There's 2 books sitting here. She always has 2 books. She reads them and she takes them back. But yeah, I love that aspect of service where I'm here to help. And librarians always are. But that's kind of, I can gravitate towards that as well because that's what pottery's all about, my pottery workshops. So I'm here to help you learn and have fun and maybe, get a little quiet, relaxed, mindful time, I guess, when working on pottery. Seems like we have a lot in common.
Yeah, I think we do. We do. We do.
Well, thank you for joining me for this podcast, Laura. It's been amazing.
No, thank you. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you to the audience for listening. I hope you've learned some more about all the books we talked about. You can tell we're book people. I mean, we talked about probably about 10 books, and there'll probably be links for them in the description of the podcast. So check out some of these books. Think about, listen to what we have to say, and let's just hope we can help you and serve you and help you become a better person. Right, Laura?
That's for sure. Thank you.
Bye.